On the last episode of Garage Noise, we straightened, repaired, and primered this dent on this Chrysler 300. And if you haven't seen that video, check out the link at the end. Today we're going to finish the repair on this Chrysler 300. I'm going to show you exactly how we take it from a primered panel to a finished product that we can be proud of. The next step in this process is we're going to block this panel to get it straight. Now, we've straightened the bodywork, and the bodywork was pretty straight, and then we primed it. Now, we put 2 good coats of primer on this so we would have some material to block it straight. And what we do by blocking is we use a block with a piece of sandpaper on it, and we hold it flat as we can on the panel to get that straight. Now, the purpose of this is to remove any waves or imperfections in that panel and get it to look as factory as possible. Now, you could see I had a little run in my primer, so I took my block and I blocked that smooth. Now, I've went ahead and I sprayed this entire panel with what we call a guide coat. That is a coat of material that covers the panel, and what it does is it gives you an idea of your high and low areas as you're blocking. So I've taken a long block here and I've put a piece of 320 grit sandpaper on it, and that's the sandpaper typically we want to use when we're in the primer portion of the repair. So we're blocking in a cross pattern direction. So we're going one direction and then we'll cross it and go the other direction. This helps you get the panel as flat as possible. And if you can see here, you can see some areas as I'm sanding over this that some black guide coat remains in those areas. That is what we call a low area. So we're going to continue blocking until all that black guide coat is disappeared, or we went through the primer into body filler or metal. If we've done that, then we have an area that needs to be addressed with some filler or something to get that panel straight. Now, guide coat's going to give you a good general idea of whether that panel is straight or not. It doesn't always show all the imperfections though. For that, you might have to use your hand, and to do that, what you do is you lay your hand flat on the panel, you run it quickly across the repaired area, and you feel for any high or low areas. It may take a little while to develop this skill, so just be patient and practice. So here now what we're doing is we're laying in a thin coat of Roberlo Crystal Glaze. And what this is this is a glazing product. It's just for small areas after you've primed, little waves in these panels. And what we've done here is we blocked this panel and it went through into the body filler and showed a little bit of a low area right here at the top of this door. So we're going to put a thin coat of glaze in here and then block it smooth. So the goal here is to lay it in as smooth as possible, especially around the edges. You want to finish it smooth so it's a gradual transition into the rest of the panel. Now, I've taped up around this door handle because I don't want a bunch of glaze down in that door handle where I'd have to hand sand it out. That takes a lot of time and can be difficult. So I went ahead and blocked this glaze off camera. If you want to know exactly how to block glaze straight, I'll leave a link to a video at the end. So now it's time to prime. We taped it all up. We don't want to get any overspray on any trim or any areas too far outside the repair. So the primer I'm using for this repair is the Roberlo ME1. It's a very good primer that sands very easy. It is designed to go over bare metal, so if we have any little bare metal areas, that's not going to be a concern. I'm also using the 3M AccuSpray gun as my primer gun, and if you haven't seen the video on that gun, check it out. I'll leave it at the end or in the description. So I did put 2 coats of the Roberlo primer on it, so we have enough material to block this straight one last time and do a finish sanding on this before we paint it. I used about 20 psi in pressure and 1.5 turns out on the volume. I'm going to block over this entire panel one last time with a 320 grit sandpaper. I'm more concerned about the areas that I use the glaze on to make sure that is straight now. So I went ahead and did my final sanding with a 600 grit sandpaper on the orbital sander. You can do this by hand. You don't have to use an orbital sander. but we're going to finish sanding the primer with 600, and then I'm going to go the outside areas, the panels that I'm blending into, and we want to prepare those with 600 as well. And what that does is it promotes adhesion of the clear coat, but it doesn't allow scratches to be shown through that clear. So now we just went ahead and washed the floor down. We're blowing all the water out, drying it all off, and then we're taping it up for paint. So what I like to do is I like to tape up all the jams first. You want to tape up the jams so no overspray gets in those jams. There's a few different ways you can do that, but I'm using foam tape here, and what that does, it has a sticky part on it and it lays in that jam and doesn't allow overspray to go in that jam. And then I'll tape up all the trim, and we're going to lay this plastic over top of it, cut out the sections that we're painting, and then tape down the rest of it. If you want me to do a video on masking to show you any tips or tricks that I have, let me know in the comments below. Okay, so now we have this Chrysler 300 all prepped out for paint. The first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and seal this. We're going to seal this primered area. It's got some areas that we broke through into the body filler when we were blocking it straight. I've got the door handles over here. We're going to blend into those and paint those. We got the rear bumper here, which we're going to seal and then paint. So we'll do that first. We'll put the sealer on the bumper, and then we'll seal the bodywork on the door. And then we've got it all taped up here. We're going to blend into this quarter panel right here, so we have a great color match on this and we don't have any issues with the color. We've sanded everything with 600. So the clear will adhere properly when we do the blend into this door. Now I'm going to put the color, I'm going to put the sealer on this, then I'm going to put the color, and then the last thing I'll do is I'll do the blend before we clear it. I'm not going to use any kind of blending agent. This is a pearl, but it's not a super high metallic finish. If you're using a high metallic finish, you're probably going to want to use a blending agent or what they call a wet bed, so those metallics lay flat in the blend area. So let's get started and get this thing painted. So what a wet bed is basically it's a base coat binder. It's straight base coat binder, and you spray it over the entire panel. And what that does for high metallics, when you do the blend, it allows those metallics to lay flat so they don't look funny underneath the clear coat and where the blend is. Just a little explanation of that. Maybe in another future video I'll go into more detail about that topic. So now I'm going to go ahead and seal this entire bumper cover. And what I like to do on my first coat of sealer, I don't put it on super wet. I find sometimes if you put sealer on real wet, it can have a reaction. It can fisheye. So I like to put it on just a medium coat, not a super wet coat, the first coat, and then I'll do a second coat on it just before we paint. So the purpose of the sealer is to provide a barrier between your primer and your paint. It's also going to give it one uniform color, so it's easier for the paint to cover properly. This color I'm spraying today is a little bit transparent, and it covers better over a light substrate. Okay, so now that we've finished laying down all our sealer, we're going to start with the base coat. I am using the Sagola 3300 GTO spray gun. If you haven't seen the review and demo on it, check out the video at the end or a link in the description. This color is pretty transparent color. Now it's not a tri-stage, but it is very transparent. So we're going to put a few coats of paint on this. Now what I like to do is I like to typically make sure I get all my edges really well. Those are the areas that you're probably going to miss if you miss anywhere and it's transparent, are around the edges of that bumper cover. So you want to put a coat on those first. I mean, typically I put a coat on those first as I go, but it's one thing you want to keep in mind when you're painting. Make sure those edges are covered. So as far as the gun setup for this base coat is, I'm running about 24 psi in pressure. It's pretty low pressure for a base coat, but I don't really want to create a lot of overspray at this point, and it's not necessary to have a lot of air pressure when you're basing. I have my fan pattern wide open, and this Sagola gun has a huge spray pattern. And I have my volume turned, I think I had it 3 turns out, which was a little bit too much paint coming out of the gun. I should have probably had it around 2. So now we'll go ahead and put the second coat of base on. And as you could see, that color is very transparent. So I think I ended up having to put about 4 coats of paint on it. Now I probably could have tinted the sealer, and that would have helped this color to cover just a little bit better. Now I am a small shop. I do, probably 2 cars a week. I'm not a big production shop. I spray everything open in the garage. I don't have a paint booth. So I did have a mixing machine, and I ended up selling it because I just did not mix up enough paint to warrant it, really. And you really got to keep on top of those. Those have to be mixed every day, agitated, and you have to use the paint. So I went ahead and sold it, and I purchased all my paint. So I don't have the stuff to tint sealer and all that readily on hand, so I just put some extra paint on it. So when I'm laying the base here, or when I'm painting anything, you want to overlap about 70%. You want to keep your distance from the panel uniform and the same. And right now I'm just covering this primered area, getting a few coats of coverage on there, and then I'll start blending out into the adjacent panels. So this particular paint job was a little bit of a struggle. I had a couple issues while painting it. One of the issues was my regulator was malfunctioning and would not hold consistent air pressure. I also had a filtration problem with my water separator and my desiccant system. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but these are things you have to deal with when you're painting sometimes. You have to be able to overcome those. I had to constantly check my air pressure. Now I edited all that out, but I was constantly checking it to make sure it was consistent. And it just causes issues with your paint job sometimes. And then on the other side of the quarter panel later on, you won't be able to see it on camera, but I had some fisheyes on that other quarter panel. Yeah, so when I laid down the clear on that other pillar, the A pillar, as soon as I put the first coat of clear on, there were 2 spots, one near the back and one near the front, that immediately separated, and no clear stuck to that spot. So that tells me there was a contamination on the panel itself, and that panel was wiped down twice. So sometimes you just can't avoid these things. Sometimes they happen. I mean, it was sanded and then it was wiped down with prep solvent twice. I may have to start using some alcohol or a water-based cleaner. But sometimes you're going to run into issues. You just have to be well equipped to overcome those issues. Now, on that quarter panel, I did end up sanding that with 600 and re-clearing that quarter panel. I did try to drop a couple coats a couple droplets of clear in those areas to fill them and wet sand them out, and they came out, but I wasn't satisfied with the results, so I went ahead and just resprayed it. So as you can see, this color is covering nicely now. It's all blended in. I'm doing the blend on the quarter panel right there, where I'm just fogging in some color into that corner panel. And remember, I am spraying the bumper cover, so it is going to match up against that quarter panel. And I'm going from kind of the 3/4 mark of that door into the front door, into the center of that front door basically, and we're blending it out a little bit here, and then I'll fog in some color on that front door a little bit farther out. And you see I'm fogging the sail panel there, so we have a good blend, and this color is pretty dang close, so it's a very blendable color. And there I'm just fogging in a dust coat there. So depending on the color, you may want to reduce your paint a little bit when you're blending like that. This particular color, I didn't have to do that, and I knew I didn't have to, so I was able to do a dust coat on like that and not have an issue. But you may want to reduce the paint just a little thinner, so it's a little bit less pigment when you're blending into another panel like that. So now I'm just checking everywhere with a light. This is just a standard light here. I'm looking around for any light areas, and then we're going to start applying the first coat of clear. So I bumped up my pressure just a bit when I'm clearing, and I'm not stopping right at the edge of the panel. I'm moving into the second panel, the door there, and we're going to do nice uniform passes, consistent speed, and we're evaluating the clear as we're laying it down so we know how it's laying down, if we need to make any air adjustments or fluid adjustments while we're painting. Again, make sure you're overlapping 70% and make sure you're getting a nice uniform finish when it's laying down. And you just look at the clear in the light and you can see how that clear is laying down and what adjustments you need to make. If it's a little bit orange peely, you want to make sure you're dialing your volume down, choking it down so there's less material coming out and a little bit more air pressure maybe, and that'll flatten it out just a bit. But you can see this Sagola gun is really laying down this clear nicely. I'm not hitting it super hard on the first coat, but I'm putting a good amount of clear on there so it has a good base to stick to, and then we'll let this flash off, and you want to let it flash off for about 10 minutes. So about the time I'm done with this bumper cover, I'll almost be ready to put another coat of clear on the door and the quarter panel. Yeah, because you remember it's 10 minutes from when you start pulling that trigger. So if I start pulling that trigger, the time it takes me to paint the rest of the panel and the bumper cover, now that quarter panel where I started, it's probably almost been about 10 minutes or close to it. So you don't want to wait too long, you know, between coats of clear. That could cause an issue as well, is doing it too quickly. Okay, so here's where I ran into that problem with the clear coat on this quarter panel. If you look right there, I zoomed in, you can see where the clear coat would not adhere to that panel. It's separated, and that's a good sign that there was a contaminant in that specific spot, and sometimes that happens. Now we're putting the second coat on, and we're going to lay it on heavier. We're going to spray it on there how we want it to look for the finished product, because typically we're only going to do 2 coats of clear. I hope you're all enjoying this video and getting something out of it. And if you are, do me a favor, support the channel. All you have to do is like, subscribe, and click the bell so you don't miss anything. And if you have a topic that you want to see covered, do me a favor, leave a comment down below and let me know what that is. Okay, we have the clear all finished. Let's take a look at the finished product. Let's put this thing together, pull it out in the sun, and take a look at it. Okay, so let's take a look at the finished product. Here it is out in the sun, all put together, ready for delivery. And as you can see, the dent came out beautiful. The paint looks flawless and the color matches perfect. Hey, to learn more about paint and body repair, click on this video now. And to support the channel, all you have to do is like, subscribe, and click on the bell so you don't miss anything. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Garage Noise.